All right, good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LaBeouf here with you. Got Brad Vandelay, Dustin Doderay with me. Listen, we're going to jump right into it. Tonight's episode, we're going to talk about what I titled it called Making the Call, Tactical Decision Making. This is probably one of my favorite things to work as of late, and it's just something that is kind of popping up in all of my privates from beginners straight through to the advanced guys. And there's just layers of this, and I really thought a lot of people could benefit from kind of peeling back some of these layers, doing a bit of a deep dive. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. So listen, we're going to cut it into, we're going to come back, we're going to talk about making the right call, how critically important it is to have this type of information and to make sure it's well integrated into your training. So please stick with us. It's going to be a great episode. Back in a few. To life and value the freedom a man has to protect his life. All right. Okay, we're back here. We had a couple technical glitches with our intro here. I'm not sure what happened last week as well. So listen, I'm just going to do a quick setup again, just in case the intro cut out for those that are following along or when we get to the podcast, if it's a little bit messed up. So as I stated already, tonight's episode is making the right call, tactical decision making. I had said that this is something that is integrating its way into all of my training, from the low-level guys, the beginner guys, all the way up to the advanced guys. It's just a real kind of I don't know, I'm just doing a real deep dive on it right now. So I thought, listen, a lot of guys can benefit from kind of having a discussion on this, peeling back some of the layers and going deep. So let's do this. Making the right call. The thing that I want to start off with first and foremost is that I have something that's called the big dominoes. And there's two parts to this. The first is that there's 4 areas that I believe the average man is deficient in. And these are the 4 areas, these are the 4 things that'll get him killed the quickest. 2 of these areas, 2 of these big dominoes that have to be knocked down is kind of really, really pertinent to what we're talking about tonight. So I'm going to kind of jump in on those 2. Number 1, men are afraid of getting into trouble. And the second domino is that men are afraid of getting it wrong. These 2 are very interconnected, but they are slightly different. So let's talk about this. Men are afraid of getting into trouble. A lot of men would push back off on this, right? Because it's not a very manly thing if you're scared of getting into trouble. You're scared of the consequences. But the reality is, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've trained, thousands of men, whether it's law enforcement, military, or you're civilian. And the reality is this. When you're a hardworking man and you're providing for your family and you have a family that you care about, that you put, prioritize above all of your needs for the most part, part of that's what it is to be a man, provide and protect. Well, you are afraid of getting in trouble, because if you do something that gets you into trouble, and now, of course, I'm talking about legal trouble. If you do something where you feel like you could be charged, you could be convicted, you'd have to go through the process of legally defending your actions. That scares people, right? Because criminal charges, even just charges, never mind criminal conviction, can fuck with your job. It can fuck with your freedoms, your ability to travel. It can fuck with your ability, just so many different things. There's a massive ripple effect. So I just want you to think about it, right? Violence, we know, is about destruction. And think of like a really clear lake, just on a beautiful morning, and you just got calm, still water. Violence, when you face people that have the intent to harm you, rocks are being thrown into that water. Just the fact that somebody's there that wants to hurt you or your family, well, to what degree do they succeed? To what degree do they harm, threaten your family? Because whether that's a pebble, and the pebble's still going to create a ripple, and that ripple's going to have an effect. So, being at the park with your family and some group of guys come up and they start threatening you and they threaten your family, and it never goes beyond a threat. Well, your children that are there, and maybe they're young children that are there, and they're feeling that energy, they're feeling unsafe and uncertain, and they're being threatened. That can have a ripple effect on them mentally, emotionally, even if nothing ever happens physically. So I just want this analogy, right? But of course, if you then have to defend and protect yourself, even if it turns out you're 100% legally and morally justified, when you have to do that, that's a much bigger rock, if not potentially a boulder, being dropped into that calm water. You're going to have a ripple effect. Being charged is different than being convicted, okay? But to have to go through the process, where we've all heard often the process is the punishment, good men are afraid of this because that will disrupt your life. It's a stress nobody wants to deal with. So men are afraid of getting into trouble legally, right? No, who wants to spend time in jail? And everybody, oh yeah, if I don't give a fuck, you fuck with my family, I'd kill the guy. I don't care if I go to jail. Yeah, you should. You should absolutely fucking care. That is going to have a that's a massive boulder being put into the lives of your family, not just yours, but your children, your wife, and it just keeps on rippling out. So we have seen over the years that men are afraid of getting into trouble. Okay. And if I just go one step deeper, this is conditioned into us. This is one of our paradigms, right? Because growing up, you were taught to be afraid of going to the principal's office or having the teacher call home or, getting in trouble at work, whatever it is. There's lots of examples of things that have conditioned us over the years. Most people have a phobic scale response to just being pulled over by a police officer for a traffic violation. People get nervous. People everyone's kind of to a degree experienced this type of stuff. Crossing the border into another country, people get nervous. Okay, so people have been conditioned to be nervous around authority, so it's in us that we don't want to get into trouble. Okay, especially big trouble like, potentially having to justify why we took a life to preserve life. Okay, so that's number one. The second one, we're afraid of getting it wrong. Now, this maybe is the hallmark of really good men. But really good men that have a really strong moral compass, are not looking for trouble. Matter of fact, one of the hallmark statements of really good men is, listen, I just want to be left alone. I just want to live my life. I am not looking for trouble. I do not want trouble. Just leave me the fuck alone. That doesn't mean they're not willing to do something if trouble finds them, but they genuinely are like, I don't want any fucking trouble. They're moral people. I don't want to have to hurt somebody. Just you live your life. I'm not judging you. Don't judge me. Just live your life. I'll live mine. So all of a sudden, when you find yourself in a conflict, there is a part of you that wants to make sure that if you do something, you are justified in doing that. Okay, so that even your own moral compass. And this is something maybe that I can get you guys to talk to if you want to just make a little mental note on this or write it down real quick. But most men don't really know what their values are, what their morals are. Again, it's easy to be like, if you fucked with my family and it came down to it, you're trying to hurt my children, I would kill you before allowing you to murder my family, right? Difference between killing and murdering. And I believe that statement is said with sincerity. They feel that way. But we all know that through the training that, man, listen, when you're in that moment, it is not crystal clear. Often you are swimming in murky waters. So yes, you recognize there's a threat there, but to what level? What degree? What are you justified in doing? Most men are not just willing to kill and go, well, maybe I went a little too hard. Fuck it. I don't care. You get what I mean? That can introduce a tremendous amount of moral trauma separate from the legal trauma. So again, I've seen this where when you put good men into shoot, no shoot drills, they are easily confused and have a really hard time separating the pre-incident indicators into appropriate levels from what would be considered a low level to a mid level to a very high level, or type of indicators. Okay, so all of this is the impetus or the setup for talking about making the right call and tactical decision making. So before we press any further, just what are your guys' visceral thoughts on the two areas, what you've experienced as a coach, what you've also gone through in your own personal journeys, but the fear of A, getting into legal trouble, and or B, the fear of reading it wrong. Okay, so I'll throw that to you guys. I think your mute's on, Brad, or my headset's unplugged, something.
It's mute.
Yep, right.
Okay, there you are.
Elephants again upstairs. I tend to mute it from time to time. There's a lot of ground here because I think there's lots of different directions that this could take us. But my visceral kind of feeling with both of these is understanding, is knowledge, is experience, right? Because if let's just say getting it wrong. Right? If I was just to take that one and isolate that for a second, and it's like, well, what would constitute getting it wrong? Like in my head, like what would feed that type of environment or feed that type of decision making where I'm like, oh, I have no idea. I'm just going to do something, So it's like, again, like when I think of like my journey weaponizing, there was so many times and so many experiences and so much development on reading pre-incident indicators, understanding the bad guy blueprints, lots of things that went in there to support those legs underneath the table to my conviction on when I would take action what constitutes action, and like what I would like that framework of is like, hey, like I know I'm not going to make the wrong decision. Could I make a less efficient decision? Sure, okay. In the moment, it's chaotic, it's violence, all those things come into play. But it's like, again, it's like that knowledge base, that experience of understanding of what constitutes that threat and what actions need to be taken, right?
Okay, Dustin.
Yeah. So on the same note of the, not wanting to get it wrong, kind of the way I look at that is when you're talking about violence, there's no mystery, there's no secrets. It's just a question of like, how well do you understand the problem? How much time have you spent training it? How well do you understand the threat cues? Do you know what I mean? Because if you study violence and you learn all those threat cues, it's like there's no secret there. You just need the knowledge. So it's like if you put the time in and get the experience, you'll then have the confidence, and then you won't have to worry about getting it wrong. You look at like a legal case in anything, and who do they bring in? Expert witnesses, people that have put in the time, got the experience, got the confidence, got the knowledge. So I think that's how I look at myself, you guys, anybody that puts a lot of time into training is like, you're the expert witness on violence. And that's kind of how you can start to circumvent being afraid of getting it wrong. Like, get the education. What's the podcast called? The Education of a Weaponized Man, right? So for me, I think that's a big part of how to deal with that aspect. As far as the not wanting to get into trouble, I think you nailed that. I would have spoke to culture the way we're brought up, same as you did. We're in the don't hit, use your words type culture. So I think you covered that pretty well.
Okay. All right. Listen, so let me come at this from a different angle then. Let me ask you guys a different question. What do you guys think erodes tactical decision making? Okay, because again, like the simple answer that's kind of been laid out, and we need to, this is the foundation. Men are afraid of getting into trouble, like legal trouble, and men are afraid of getting it wrong. I think those two things alone we could talk about for an entire podcast, because the male ego has a hard time admitting that they're afraid of anything. So the word fear just, most men are like, fuck you, automatically go into denial mechanisms. Part of what you need to do when you're training for violence and really want to operate as your family's first responder at a professional level is you can't afford to have your own bias. You can't afford to rationalize, justify, minimize, make excuses, or flat out to refuse truths that might exist. So one, I'll say it right now, I'm absolutely afraid of getting into trouble. Right? I don't want to have to deal with legal charges. I don't want to have to go through the process of being charged and being arrested and handcuffed in front of my family and being taken down to the station and strip searched and put through the whole, fingerprinted and photographed and spending time now maybe for 3-4 days, in a holding cell or being sent to the remand center and stuff like that. Just the ripple effect of things that are going through your brain for what might happen if a conviction comes from this. And yes, being charged is a long way away from being convicted. But the point is, you're still going to start going through your mind goes into the future and starts going, geez, what if? What if I end up being charged? You can't travel. What happens to your job? What happens to your career? I don't know about anybody else, but next month I still have bills to pay. Process. And then never mind going through all the subsequent court appearances. Like that's a tremendous amount of lost income. There's all these different things. So if you're not afraid of getting into trouble, then I don't think you're being honest with yourself, or B, I think you're fucking less than intelligent. Okay, so that's just the reality of it. So now the second part is I am also afraid of getting it wrong, which is what you guys are both speaking to. This is why we spend the time saturating with the information. This is why this type of the pre-incident indicators, and you put like Dustin, you're talking about how well do you know or understand the information, and becoming an expert witness. So your own expert witness on violence and saying, I know these things. This is all great. But at the end of the day, can you honestly sit here and say that just because you've done all of this training and you continue to do all this training, that you no longer have a fear of getting into trouble and you no longer have any fears or self-doubt about getting it wrong? Because I think, the problem with this is that that's what that implies. I'm an expert witness. I've done this for so long. I'm an expert. I really dislike the word expert, not in the way that you used it. That's 100% accurate. Yeah. But you get why, because an expert just assumes that you know everything and there is no room for error. That's what most people think. Sure. And it's like, I think you go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to kind of add to that previous statement or clarify perhaps, I think that's what a better explanation that would be like, that's why that's the goal. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not the result I have.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is to become that. That's
Mhm.
why this is a lifelong pursuit. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? If otherwise, I'd have been done 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's like, you ask us that sometimes. Are you guys done? And we just laugh at you because we're like, no.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's why, is because you don't necessarily ever feel that way. You
Yeah.
definitely still continue to have these feelings, which is just that motivational feeling or fuel to keep training, to keep working, to keep learning, right?
Yeah. I think right off the bat too, I would requalify that. And I was just, as you were talking, Dustin, I was just trying to think of maybe what I would like is a better word, and the best that I can come up with in this moment. And maybe you guys can compound this a little bit or synergize it a bit. But it's funny, right? Because it's weird. I don't see myself as an expert, yet I've spent 30 years doing this stuff, right? So I feel myself as, and here's the word, here's why I want to put this word in, and maybe you can come up with a better word. I see myself and I would say I'm reasonably proficient. And the reason I'd say reasonably, and maybe that's a bit softer, you say, well, geez, you've been doing this for 30 years and you're only reasonably proficient. I'm not talking about fighting skill. I'm talking about all of it. And if we're, because we're kind of talking about being afraid of getting in trouble legally and making tactical decisions. If you're going to make a decision and that gets you in trouble legally or morally, where you go against your own conscience, you do something that is morally outside your scope of norm of what your morals are. Those things are going to get you in trouble legally. Post-traumatic stress disorder, all of these different types of things. But the reason I say reasonably, because in a court of law and with my own moral compass. I mean, human beings aren't perfect, and I'm far from perfect. Every single day, though, I get up, and it's like I want to. If I take some sort of action in defense of myself, my family, my property, I would hope that it's within the realm of reasonable. It was like, was it reasonable for me to believe that my life was in jeopardy? Was it reasonable to believe that I needed to be able to intervene to protect my piece of property for whatever reasons at whatever level? Do you get what I mean? So the word reasonable is very powerful in our legal culture because laws and being charged, let's say in the realm of self-defense, it's not about the facts necessarily. It's about what was there that led you to reasonably believe that this was that. Again, let's just talk about it was reasonable for you to believe that you were facing imminent grievous bodily harm and death. It was reasonable to believe that if this course of action continued, it would end up with the loss of your life. At the end of the day, some of those facts might come out that you go, listen, I believed he had a weapon. Was that reasonable? Turns out he doesn't have the weapon, but was it reasonable? So hopefully that kind of makes sense, and I believe there is a better word for it. But when the ego's not attached to it, I want to be reasonably skilled, reasonably proficient, meaning, and the same with my own moral compass. You don't, in life and death situations, you're operating off often incomplete information, under extreme stress, where fractions of seconds might mean the difference between living and dying. So at the end of the day, if what I'm doing is reasonable to my moral compass and reasonable within what I believe my legal rights are, then really what more can you do? I think if you start going, I'm an expert, I know this, I know that, then what happens is there's more room for bias to come into this. So again, it's like, critical thinking almost. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm a critical thinker. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Brad.
It is, something that just popped in my head as you're saying this is kind of rooting in identity. And, like if I think about it and I look at myself, it's like, well, I believe I'm a good man.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I'm a good person. I'm not going out fucking carjacking people. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like we're good people. And a lot of the people, all the people that we're training with, they're good people,
Yep.
So like is part of that process, like kind of like tying into what you're saying about like that reasonable to assume. It's like, okay, well listen, like I'm a good person and I was taking my daughter to school and something happened. And it's like, you're not out there, you're not instigating, you're not assaulting people, you're not doing those things. So like part of that is like, I don't like, do you not rely, that's not probably a strong enough word for it, but like, do you take that into account when you're talking about like, hey, like, yeah, but I'm a good person. So I made these decisions based on my moral compass that we're talking about, and having imperfect information and imperfect environment because it's a violent situation, it's like, so I almost like, I want to say I did the best that I could. I don't know if that's like the right wording for it.
Yeah.
But you kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah, I 100%. I think what we're trying to do is we have this counterbalance between saying, listen, you invest so much time and energy into training to develop these quote unquote expert level skills, to really be familiar with the information, understand what your rights are, understand what your morals are, what lines what hills are you willing to die on. Like all of those things are great, right? But in the real world, these things are dynamic. These situations aren't scripted. This stuff is happening. It's evolving. It's deteriorating. And one of the things that I want to get into is that it's multi-layered. So I think the thing of saying, listen, we work so hard all the time consistently to sharpen these skill sets so that when we say things like, listen, I'm a reasonable person. I'm a critical thinker. I'm a reasonable person. So I have empathy, which is different than sympathy. Empathy means I'm seeing things from different perspectives, meaning that I'm not just viewing interactions that I have in this world from my perspective and how this impacts me solely. Do you know what I mean? I'm recognizing, like, you wake up in the morning, you go outside, and there's somebody on your property. And, we had an incident where one of our clients goes out and there's a man in his yard. And so he goes out at a high level because it's like, aggressive and like, what are you doing? Because like, I'm now in defensive mode of my property. And then at the end of the day though, and the excuse the guy gives, because the guy has a certain image. And so the brain starts going, based off what you look like, I'm treating you like that, so on and so forth, which is okay. You're progressively de-escalating. Point is, at the end of the day, it turns out that it's a neighbor of his that just moved in a few houses down and he's looking for his kid's ball. Now, it's all fine. It all works out and nobody's hurt, all these types of things. I'm just saying that in the moment of reasonableness, you have to look at this and you have to, be able to switch on and go, this may, in fact, be a legitimate threat. And so you respond at an appropriate level of readiness. Okay? But at the same time, you're reasonable in your assessment and you're not just like, you didn't just make a singular decision and like, he didn't go out as a hammer and everything's a nail. And then you start hammering the nail just to realize, oh, fuck, I made a mistake. This is not what it looked like at first. That to me is reasonableness. So you can go out ready for righteous threat level, and yet you're reasonable and well-trained enough and enough of a critical thinker that you're making tactical decisions, processing information as it's happening, that then leads you to a different conclusion, which turns out to be right. And then you're going, hey, thank God, I had those skill sets. Otherwise, but most people say, what? You come on my property, fuck you. And it's like, oh, really? Just anyone walks onto your property, yet you walk on my property and fuck you. I will beat you. You have no business being on my property. It's like, okay, great. I get that. But lots of people come onto people's property. Doesn't mean they all need to be, they're all a threat. Anyway, so I don't want to get too far off that, but I think we're making the point of why you need to be reasonable in critical thinking. Okay, so fear of getting in trouble, fear of getting it wrong. Now let me jump to the question that I think is really good to go from here. With all the training you have, right? All of the years of practice and all of that stuff to build this reasonable critical thinking mindset, okay, that is fluid, adaptable, and able to be accessed in the moment. What erodes tactical decision making? Okay, what do you guys think erodes your tactical decision making? If you want, I'll throw mine down first, but mine's going to take yours, I think. Once you come to it, you'll be like, oh, that's what I was going to say. And then we'll never know if it was true or not because you didn't say it first. But actually, I'll say this. Here's my first visceral response to this. And I'm gonna say it from a way where I'm going to be a bit egotistical in the beginning, which is contrary to everything we just said. But if I sat here and went, I've been training, I'm an expert, I've been doing this, I understand my legal rights, I have been doing shoot, no shoot scenario training for 20 years, I'm good at making tactical decisions, all this, so I'm this, my shit doesn't stink. I am fucking just so good at making these decisions. The thing that I think about first, over 30 years, where I'm going, yeah, I've made some dumb decisions, right, is because the layers of how many decisions need to be made at the same time or within fractions of seconds of each other. There is, I actually, prior to this podcast, and it just to give the people that are listening a bit of a mental image, and the ones that are watching, I will someday complete this because I think it's a really good graphic image. Unfortunately, it was much deeper than I didn't have time. Think of it like a tree. And at the bottom of the tree, you have the roots going into the soil. Those roots are like fundamental decisions that need to be made. The strategies that you're going to employ, what your overall goal is in that tactical situation. So it's the overall goal, the strategies. Okay, that's probably your two biggest roots. Then as you go up the tree, well, the bark of the tree, right? And every branch of the tree and every leaf of the tree, these are all other areas where decisions need to be made. And so at the end of the day, when you start breaking down all of the tactical decisions that have to be made in a life and death violent encounter, you are dealing with a significant size of a tree with significant number of branches coming out of that and leaves coming out of that. How many times in scenarios have we seen new people get distracted or overwhelmed because of all of this kind of filler or background white noise, movement, verbiage, talking, lighting, terrain changes, all of these things that simply have, at the end of the day, could all be sensory gated because they have no impact, direct impact on the tactical situation that's forming. But all of those had to have a decision in front of the sensory gating. Yet there is no decision, they are simply overloaded. And so their decision-making process gets rendered down to one decision at a time, and it's very slow, very plodding, because often they're having to work it through in the logical brain, which has no part of combat. Blood is literally draining out of your forebrain when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, right? When you have the physiological, survival response, blood will begin to drain out of your forebrain where you problem solve, rational think, all that type of stuff. So your tactical decision-making process has to be connected. It has to be achieved through operant conditioning and kind of built into a stimulus response type of modality that exists in the expert memory that you're building, not the cognitive, frontal lobe area. Right. So hopefully that makes sense. Right. But to me, that's the number one thing. I can sit there right now and just go, listen, despite all the years of training, it's volume of information. It's volume of decisions that have to be made. And every environment can be different. True or false, we could find ourselves facing two guys that aren't, let's say they're mid-level threats. Even though there's two of them, they're a mid-level threat. So you have the skill set, the knowledge, the capability to handle these two guys. Mid-level threat. True or false, if I got to change the environment, I could put you in an environment that was so dynamic that it would take two mid-level guys that you really have no problem handling and turn that into a situation that is barely survivable, all because of the environmental changes I made and how that overloaded or taxed your decision-making process.
100%.
True or false?
Yep.
True.
True.
1,000% true. So how does that happen to people that have so-called expert skill set? And then all of a sudden, one or two things in an environment can overload tactical decision making, which is why people need to become aware of what all these subcomponents are that require decision making skill sets. And you have to then develop the line familiarization. You have to develop the neurosociative conditioning, the operant conditioning, the stimulus response. You have to train that and layer that on top of everything else because it's all happening at once. What happens when you put two guys in an octagon or two guys in a jiu-jitsu mat or two guys into a kickboxing ring? What is happening? What do we mean when we say these are more sterile environments?
Well, there's less
Decisions that need to be made.
information that
Yeah. You the environment is known to you. The fighter is known to you. The rules are known to you. The length of time you'll fight are known to you. The type of gloves you'll use or won't use, the weight of them, it's all known to you. The time that you'll have that you'll go to the event is known to you. The skill sets that you need to train prior to attending the event are all known to you. All of these things are known to you. And people take that for granted. They think that those things are insignificant so long as you got the hardest kick, or you got the tightest guard, or you got the slickest new choke, or whatever it is. They think that these things, that's all that matters. Then all of a sudden they find themselves in a real world, three-dimensional dynamic environment, and their tactical decision-making skill sets are completely overloaded. I mean, I see this every single day when you watch people that have any type of combat sport training or traditional martial arts training. When you put them in an environment that causes them to make different decisions about where to look. They look right at someone, or they look through somebody. So I look down at his chest, I look through his shoulders. But you got to understand, you're in an environment that's 360 degrees. You're making bad tactical decisions for where to look. And then you see him trip over shit, or run into shit, or move into a corner, or do whatever it is. And it's like, you haven't even been trained to understand the volume of decision-making skills that you needed to develop when it comes to just understanding vision or perception, and just training your peripheral acuity. Like that's one branch with 100 leaves on it. And people are like, they have no idea that branch even exists. And yet they think that somehow it's just going to miraculously, they're going to make all these great decisions when they've been trained only one way, which is to focus on the fighter. Look at the fighter, look at your opponent. Never mind the fact that there's two opponents, which is much harder to look at it. You got to, again, you have to make different tactical decisions. I hope people, like, again, because without being able to physically, the best is when because normally I just put people in drills and then just watch them, and they're sitting there doing something, and inevitably something happens. You just say, well, you got to make decisions. The problem is you're making a decision. You're making singular decisions at a rate slower than a turtle. Like, biggest problem is when you made that one decision, I needed you to make 7 decisions in half the time. Not one decision in double the time. 7 decisions in a tenth of the time. And that's just normal. And then a fraction of a second later, you got another 3 decisions to make, or 1, or 10, or 2, because it's constantly mutating. Does that kind of make sense? So my biggest goal for this podcast is to give people a sense, without maybe fully understanding it all, but a sense of how many decisions need to be made. So yes, you might sit there and go, Greg, when somebody's standing in front of me and he is a threat to my life, it is reasonable for me to believe he's a threat to my life, I won't miss it. I will know it. And that's interesting because, yeah, in a sterile environment, you might make that decision. You might see 5 indicators that tell you that. But when you are in an absolute panic, wondering if it's just one of them, and wondering if the noise you hear upstairs is somebody in your kid's room, or if your child's about to walk down the stairs and enter into a bad situation unbeknownst to them, or where your wife is, or any of these other things that can stress you, that you go, I've never had to handle these decisions. If it is my kid, do I stay and deal with this guy? Do I go upstairs and check on my kid? Do you turn your head and you're distracted? Are you not listening and paying attention, but you're trying to hear what's going on in your bedroom or outside? You know what I mean? Was that the neighbor screaming? What's these are decisions. This amount of stimulus is flooding into you. And yet when you train in that environment, it's 2 things. It's always challenging. But when you train for something, it's less challenging. The challenge is still there, but it's manageable. And you get good at making those decisions. You know what? Maybe this is an analogy, and it's probably Dustin's analogy. He just kind of sent it to me telepathically because I think it's a pretty fucking good one. I texted you. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I got the text. The difference between him being a doctor, let's say a neurosurgeon, obviously very specialized, and take that neurosurgeon and put him in a ER. Put him in the ER room in a busy hospital in like Chicago or Detroit. Now, I'm sure that ER doctor, that neurosurgeon, has all the skill to handle it, but that's a different stressor. He's going to go home at night and he's going to be fucking bagged. It's going to be overwhelming to him because A, he hasn't done it in years, or B, he's so singularly focused and used to working off just the stimulus and the tactical decisions he has to make within the context of what he does. Whereas an ER doctor, our people are screaming at him and he's treating multiple patients and triaging them and making life and death decisions. And, I can only imagine that. But I think that analogy can give people a bit of a sense of like, some doctors are great ER doctors and some doctors are just great family doctors and some doctors are just great surgeons and so on and so forth. I think it's a good analogy. You can have a pro fighter who is a great pro fighter, but he is not necessarily the best, in a violent chaos. He's not the guy that you want in the deepest fog of war. Doesn't mean he couldn't be. It just means that maybe that's not his specialty. So you're talking about, so let's pull back off all that stuff and just come to us. We're talking about training. Right now, our mission is not 100% focused on law enforcement and military like we were years past. Our focus right now is quote unquote average men who often are coming to us with zero experience. And yet they have an absolute necessity to become formidable men, dangerous men. So you have to take people with zero experience, and you cannot just teach them something physically. You cannot just teach them what their legal rights are. You cannot just have conversations about, getting it right. You have to have integrated development of all of these areas so that as you move them forward, they are growing their tactical decision-making skill sets along with everything else that is happening, so that when they find themselves in a real world critical situation, they have capacity to handle it and make good tactical decisions that will protect them physically, protect them legally, and protect them morally. That's the trident. That's the three areas that they need to inoculate against, right? Physical protection, legal protection, and moral protection. Okay, so I don't know, do you guys agree with that or disagree with that, or what do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. One thing that hit as you were talking about, it becoming more manageable as you train it more. The thing that kind of hit me is like, it's that filter. We all have a filter trying to filter out what decision is the most important decision in that moment. Because like you said, it's going to feel overwhelming. There's going to be so many decisions, but your ability to filter some of that white noise out and figure out what really needs to be decided on first and foremost, prioritizing things like that. So for me, that's how I view it, is like there is a filter in there, a filtration process, and that gets more and more refined as time goes on, which makes some of that just far more manageable.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're obviously talking about is the reticular activating part of the brain, right? Where you set the filter. So the more you train and the more that you are saturated with all of the different areas and understanding what decisions need to be made and what are all these areas, then you can quickly go, yes, no. You can, omit, saw it, done, move, next, this, yes, no, this. Like, again, just a trauma scene. Most people are overwhelmed by, a trauma scene. They show up and, one car accident is very different than a 10-car pileup where you got multiple injuries. Children, adults, seniors, like, when you got to get on there, crisis management, trauma management, it's like triaging. That's very intense stuff, right? So in anything, you look at combat pilots, you look at combat medics, you look at, frontline soldiers, they're just constantly making a multitude of tactical decisions under pressure, with incomplete information, constantly changing and updating information, and they're making life and death decisions. And then one of the core skills that comes out the bottom of this is often you can get people that not only do they get overwhelmed and they're just missing decisions that need to be made. So if you don't make a decision, that's the same as just deciding, like, it is a decision. You're like, I don't even know what the fuck. So you're going to have, you're going to have fallout from that. But also there is paralysis analysis. Then there's the people that just it's so overwhelming and the information is so incomplete that they're like, well, I don't have enough information to make that decision. So they do nothing, which at the end of the day, one of the things that maybe you guys can talk to is the more you train this way and the more that you're reticular activator, and the more that you've learned to make strong decision-making muscles and understand all of the different areas that where decisions need to be made, but you get really good at course correcting. One part of it is that you stop trying to be right. I mean, we call it combat accuracy. We have a term for it because it happens all the time. You're going to make some wrong decisions when you're dealing with imperfect information coming at you at fractions of a second where it's constantly changing, mutating, and updating. You're going to take an action that you believed was reasonable in the moment, and a fraction of a second later, you can go, this is no longer reasonable, or go, in fact, new information shows you that you were wrong. And doesn't mean that you're liable for that. Doesn't mean it was negligent. It just means you were wrong. There's reasons why you get things wrong in combat. But then you course correct. And a lot of people don't have the ability to course correct. How many times as we as men argued a point where then we realize, yeah, okay, I think I'm wrong on this, and just continue to argue the point. This was one of my favorite hobbies growing up. You know what I mean? I had many a great argument with my mom on this front. You know what I mean? And my brother-in-law, we had great arguments where I was like, shit, he's made some good points. Fuck it, I'll die on this hill. You know what I mean? But imagine that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's why one of your favorite quotes is the most certain person in the room is always right.
100%. I mean, I think I can think back, and I mean, growing up, I'm sure that my behavior lent itself to the definition of gaslighting, right? Because you just get into a place of conviction. I will say this, though, also, is that at some point after things calm down, I've also been the person that's willing to go back and say, I've changed my position on this, which, but that's when you're young, you grow, you get more maturity. The training has also taught me to not be that way, because you're going to get some things wrong. That's okay. Course correct. I get more pride nowadays of being the guy who course corrects quicker than being the guy who is never wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I have way more, and I know you guys are the same way. We just have way more value attached to, it doesn't matter. I mean, we make decisions based off the best and then just course correct. Those are the most effective people. And that applies in combat too. But hopefully, again, that's a significant bookend to our conversation of making the right call and good tactical decision-making skill set is, good God, don't your training cannot lead you to believe that being a good tactical decision maker is equal to being right all the time, because that is so far from the truth. It's just not even funny. Okay. And there's a lot of reasons why we might be wrong. Imperfect information, speed, all pressure, fear, all these different types of things. But I mean, we'll probably end up having to wrap this up here fairly quickly, because the next part that I would like to go into, which is significantly harder to do in this format, is to try just to kind of give people a much deeper, detailed list of what all these decision-making areas are. But I think I don't think there's going to be the value quite there. If I just take one area like environment, it's very interesting if I just take an open room, let's just say like a 20-foot by 20-foot room, okay? Nothing in there. If you attack somebody in just that open room, so whether it's one guy or two guys, whatever, but if I just attack somebody, do they, move straight backwards? Do they drive straight into me? Do they go left? Do they go right? Do they go to the corner? Do they go to the sidewall? Like, what do they do? And for a lot of people, it would just be visceral. They would just react. And this is kind of my point. Amateurs react to things, and professionals act or they respond. Okay, same thing. It's meaning that there's training there. There's tactical knowledge. That implies they've made a decision. Not that it's the right decision, that they've made a decision. So if you then all of a sudden put a couple of environmental pieces into that room, a table, let's just say a taller, stand of some sort, whatever it is, just different dimension things, then you attack that guy again. Well, does he try to move towards the lower but longer object, or does he move to the narrower but taller object? Does he go clockwise around it or counterclockwise? And some people go, well, what the fuck does it matter? He moves to something just trying to get away from you. But what lead is your opponent in? Because if you're moving counterclockwise, depending on his lead, you are taking away his ability to hit to his back because there's an object there, or vice versa counterclockwise. Like, I'm just trying to get people to understand that this is just so many decisions based off just the environment. Then you start layering in where the egress is, where other people are, and what are the potentials for mutations and tracking expedient weapons, and then how does it change if the lighting condition changes or you're tracking and terrain changes, and is there a terrain that's better to move to or worse to move to? Are there slippery spots or stable spots? You know what I mean? Where counter ambush points, where can you use elevation? On top of all of what are my strategies that I'm going for? What are the tactics I'm doing physically there? What's my mindset? What's your self-talk at? Like, it's just to go through a much more detailed list of all of the different things that you'd want to train when it comes to the environment, or when it comes to all of your different tactical decisions for different, like, there's just so many layers of that. But again, that's going to be, I think, get everyone a little bit bogged down. So I think hopefully we've painted a pretty clear picture of just how tactical decision making is far more complex than just, do I go or no, don't go, shoot, no shoot. Do I engage or don't I engage? Do I punch him or don't I punch him? Right? And so in your training, these things need to be accounted for. And my last point maybe, and then you guys can throw down range what you have, is if you are not aware of the complexities and the depth of tactical decision-making training, then what happens is when you get overwhelmed, when you are just simply unaware, and therefore you're not making tactical decisions, when you are just reacting, you are at greatly increased risk of getting it wrong, getting into trouble, which circles us right back to the two main fears that we started with. You are more likely to do something that is not in accordance with your conscience, which is the quickest way to get a piece of post-traumatic stress disorder. You are far more at risk legally simply because you took actions that were made off decisions that you have no conscious memory of ever having made, and you have just, you don't feel a sense of responsibility there because it just was a reaction. But here's the thing, reactions are not a legal defense. That's not a legal defense. And so hopefully people can see where this whole thing can spiral out of control so fucking quickly. And remember, you're talking about training amateurs to a professional level of skill set and knowledge. Okay, that's the zero to formidable. It's not about the fighting prowess alone. It's about the knowledge, the skill sets, the decision-making capabilities that they have, physically, right, legally, and morally. Okay, that's kind of the essence of what I want people to walk away with from this podcast. I don't know. How about you? Does that resonate, or is there anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, it makes me think of, like, obviously there is a tremendous amount of information input and thin slicing that happens during that process. And it makes me think about something, because how many times has the question been asked, like, well, what would you do if I attacked you? And it's like, I don't know what I would do. Like, how would I know what I would do? Because it's like where am I? Do I have my family? Am I sick? Am I injured? Am I, like, there's so many of these things that impact a decision. And I know it was kind of, it might be kind of just silly to think of, but it's like, yeah, like, you get to a point where you're okay saying, like, I don't know what I would do, because I clearly do not have the information in front of me to answer that question.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, so, like, there's just so many variables. And I think that the more that you go through, the less that you're actually trying to answer that question. If someone's like, hey, what would you do if I attacked you? It's like, someone who is maybe early in their journey be like, well, I would do this and I would do that and I would do this. And it's like, anybody asks you, say, what would you do? It's like, I don't know what I would do. I know I would do something,
Yeah.
but I don't know what that something is because I don't know the information that's in front of me,
Yeah.
the stimulus that's in front of me exactly,
Yeah.
the angle, like it's just like you said. There's so many leaves that need to be accounted for.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a reflection of really good training. Because even though, like we say, in a combat situation, you're dealing with often incomplete, imperfect information that is changing and coming in fractions of seconds. But people have it. You know, what'd you do if someone pulled a gun on you? That's not even a thing. Like, there is no information there. It's a non-existent hypothetical. And when you have people that are trained to make tactical decisions based off all of the information that is present, then you're making the right thing going, I don't know. Because there's nothing to do because there's nothing happening. So I would do nothing because there is no gun. You know what I mean? And then, they put the finger in the head, then I guess you have context and now you can make different decisions. You get what I mean? But then it becomes something. They say, oh, you're pulling out, nobody pulls a hypothetical pistol on their therapist, right? Couples retreat. Got to watch that if you haven't seen that one. But anyways, yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Dustin, anything kind of final?
Yeah, it's interesting because last night, driving home from training with one of the other guys that we train with, we were having a conversation, and I can't remember how he got into it, but it's kind of fitting to this in a way because I was telling him about how at work, obviously everybody's work, you deal with problems, stuff comes up and you got to deal with it. And I was telling how one day, one of my staff was saying like how come you don't get, like, you never get stressed? Like, you know what I mean? Like, things just don't seem to bother you. Like, how is that possible? And I think a lot of it's what we're talking about right now. It's literally because I don't take time to mourn the problem. I don't take time to mourn bad decision making. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, again, it's like kind of that filtration system. It's all of it. It's just having all those experiences of like having to make decisions like on the fly, quick, with imperfect information, and understanding that like there's not always time to like completely overanalyze things. You just have to make a decision in the moment and drive on and course correct, like you talked about tonight. And I think that's a big part of it is like, I don't take time to mourn the fact that there is an issue or that there's a decision to be made or that maybe I didn't make the best decision. It's like just course correct and keep going on. So I don't know. It's not like an exact fit, but
I think it is.
Listening to you guys wrap up.
Yeah.
But
I actually think it is. And I think it's a great endpoint because, lots of guys that we train, thank God, will never find themselves in their righteous fight facing violence. They'll use the skill sets, the knowledge of training in lots of ways and different low-level things, mid-level things, but they may never face a righteous life and death situation where they have to apply all of the training and all of the hard work that they've been doing over the years to protect themselves, their family, and their property. But every single day, life is fucking brutal, man. And every day you got problems and challenges and you need to make tactical decisions for your life and for your business and for your work and for your family on all these different levels. And that's what it is to be weaponized. I mean, that's the inoculation. I mean, it's very, very fitting and very apt, I think, because every time I finished training with Paul, with my mentor, it was always, every time I was coming back to Canada, he's like, you're so lucky going back. Like, you're so lucky. You've been here for 2 months, people trying to beat you, stab you, mass attack. Like, you just been immersed in violence for 2.5 months. And now you're going home for 30 days or 45 days. What the fuck is life going to do to you? What is life going to do to you? You know what I mean? Like, you spend 3 months doing this or 2 months doing this. You go back home for a month or 2 months. What is life going to do to you? You're going to go, it's like you're going to nirvana. There are no life problems that you can't handle. And that becomes a very true statement, and that's a reflection of what you do. You know what I mean? And for a lot of people, life is killing people. Life is winning. People are, we call it being under the influence. It's not just drugs and alcohol anymore. It's fucking mental health. It's stress. It's all of these chronic problems from just life. Yet when you have the skill sets of a weaponized man where you can make tactical decisions and handle and process overload and not get overloaded, all of these things we've talked about tonight, what is life, what's life going to throw at you that you can't handle, right? And so I think it's a great way to wrap that up. So, all right, Kate, let's end it here, guys. Really good conversation tonight. Hopefully everyone listening found some value to this. I think it's a really good and very, very important topic to dive into. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it's just something that I'm really hyper-focused in all of my training right now is really, really going deeper into tactical decision-making for all of our clients and just really helping them build this muscle and skill set because, again, it will help them in every single level and every single aspect of their life. So thank you guys so much for being part of the conversation. We appreciate everybody listening. Listen, stay safe, stay weaponized. We'll chat again soon, everybody. Take care.